He walked into one of the most recognizable buildings in the world and sold it. Not once, twice. And the most terrifying part? It almost worked both times. Paris, 1925. The city is still exhaling from the worst war in human history. 8 years since the guns went quiet on the Western Front, and the scars are everywhere. In the half-rebuilt streets, the missing men, the strange, nervous energy of a continent that survived something it wasn't supposed to survive. The Eiffel Tower stands at the heart of it all. But here's what the postcards don't tell you. In 1925, a lot of Parisians despised that tower. Gustave Eiffel had built it in 1889 as a temporary structure, a monument to industry, meant to stand for 20 years and then come down. It never did. And by the mid-1920s, it was rusting, expensive to maintain, and widely mocked as an iron eyesore squatting on one of the most beautiful skylines in the world. French newspapers had been arguing for its demolition for decades. That detail, that one specific crack in the public's trust, is what made everything possible. Because somewhere in that city, a man in an expensive suit was reading those same newspapers and thinking, perfect. His name was Victor Lustig, born in 1890 in Hostinec, a small Bohemian town that is now part of the Czech Republic. The son of a mayor, educated, charming, and restless in a way that small towns cannot contain. By the time he arrived in Paris in the spring of 1925, he was 35 years old and had already run cons across half the world. He spoke 5 languages fluently: Czech, German, French, English, Italian. And he used every single one of them as a weapon. He had swindled millionaires on transatlantic ocean liners. He had sold a machine he claimed could print $100 bills, the infamous Romanian box, to bankers who absolutely should have known better. He had been arrested dozens of times across Europe and America and had escaped or talked his way out of virtually every charge. Victor Lustig did not look like a criminal. He looked like someone you desperately wanted to impress. And in the spring of 1925, sitting in his suite at the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the grandest hotels in Paris, he hatched the single most audacious scam in the history of confidence tricks. He was going to sell the Eiffel Tower. The mechanics were elegant because they were simple. Lustig had forged letterhead from the French Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs, the government department technically responsible for the tower at the time. He used this to invite 5 of Paris's wealthiest scrap metal dealers to a confidential meeting at the Hôtel de Crillon. Not a public meeting, a discreet one, the kind you don't talk about. Each of the 5 men received a personal letter. Each was made to feel specially selected. They arrived, and there was Lustig, impeccably dressed, authoritative, the very image of a senior French government official. Explaining in calm, measured tones that the Eiffel Tower had become a financial liability the government could no longer sustain. The maintenance costs were catastrophic. The structure was deteriorating. The decision had been made at the highest levels. The tower would be sold for scrap metal demolition. But, and here, Lustig leaned forward, lowering his voice. This was enormously sensitive. The public announcement had not yet been made. There would be outrage. So, the bidding process would need to remain strictly confidential. Could the gentlemen agree to that? They agreed. 5 wealthy men, 5 briefcases, all of them suddenly holding what felt like the opportunity of a lifetime. Lustig watched them carefully throughout the meeting. He was always watching, and one man caught his attention. André Poisson. Poisson was successful, but he was hungry in a way the others weren't. Newly arrived in Paris's business elite, still proving himself, still desperate for the kind of insider access that separates the truly powerful from the merely wealthy. Lustig could see it. He had spent his life reading rooms like this one. He arranged a private follow-up meeting with Poisson, just the two of them. And in that meeting, Lustig did something brilliant. He confessed, not to the con, but to something that made the con feel real. He admitted quietly that his government salary was embarrassingly low, that a man in his position with access to deals like this one sometimes needed to supplement his income. He was, he hinted, open to a small consideration, an unofficial arrangement, completely understood in these circles, of course. Poisson didn't hesitate. A bribe. This was how real government deals worked. This was the proof he'd been waiting for, that this was genuine, that the man across from him was a real official playing the real game of power. He paid the full asking price for the scrap metal rights to the Eiffel Tower, and then he paid the bribe on top of it. The total sum has never been precisely confirmed, but estimates place it at somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 French francs, a fortune in 1925, equivalent today to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Lustig took the money, walked out of the hotel, and caught a train to Vienna with a suitcase full of cash before André Poisson had even made it home. Now here is where it gets extraordinary. Lustig waited. He waited for the police to come, for the newspapers to run the story, for the scandal to break. And days passed, then weeks. Nothing. Because André Poisson, a proud, ambitious man who had just bought the Eiffel Tower from a fraudster, could not bring himself to report it. The humiliation would have destroyed him. His reputation, his standing, everything he had worked to build in Paris's business world. So he said nothing. He absorbed the loss. He buried it. And Victor Lustig, sitting in Vienna reading the French papers and finding no mention of himself whatsoever, made a decision that tells you everything you need to know about the man. He went back. Within months, he was back in Paris, same hotel, same forged letterhead, same pitch. A second set of dealers, a second round of confidential meetings. He nearly pulled it off a second time, got further into the process than he had any right to, before one of the new targets grew suspicious and went to the police. Lustig ran. He was already on a train to America before the gendarmerie finished taking the statement. He left Paris with enough money to disappear. And he did. The Eiffel Tower would be the peak of Victor Lustig's career, but not the end of it. He spent the next decade in America, running increasingly dangerous operations, eventually graduating to full-scale counterfeiting, printing fake U.S. $100 bills in quantities large enough to concern the United States Treasury. The Secret Service called him the most dangerous counterfeiter in American history. They caught him in 1935. He tried to escape from a federal detention facility in New York. Actually made it out of a window using a rope made from bed sheets, which feels almost too on-brand. They caught him again within hours. He died in Alcatraz in March 1947. The cause listed on his death certificate was pneumonia. He was 57 years old. Under occupation, the document simply reads, apprentice salesman. Someone, somewhere, had a sense of humor. What Lustig understood, what made him genuinely brilliant in the most unsettling way, was that the con was never really about the Eiffel Tower. The tower was just a prop. The real product he was selling was exclusivity, the feeling of being on the inside, the thrill of knowing something powerful that other people didn't know. He wasn't exploiting stupidity. André Poisson was not a stupid man. Lustig was exploiting something far more universal, the hunger to belong to the room where real decisions get made. The bribe wasn't a flaw in Poisson's judgment. It was the moment his judgment confirmed what he most wanted to believe. And that is why this story still matters. Not because a man once sold the Eiffel Tower, but because the conditions that made it possible, the desire for insider access, the willingness to keep quiet about embarrassment, the way wealth and status make people feel immune to being deceived, those conditions have never gone anywhere. The next time someone invites you